If you want to understand why so many people stay poor while talking obsessively about getting rich, start with a number so small it insults your ego. $100 doubled 14 times becomes more than 1.6 million. That is not magic, that is math. The tragedy is that almost nobody wants the math, they want the miracle. They want the leap, the breakout, the screenshot, the one deal that lets them skip 10 years of discipline and walk straight into freedom. They do not want wealth. They want escape velocity without building an engine. I have spent my life studying capital, and I can tell you something most people do not want to hear. The fastest road to wealth is often a test designed to expose what is weakest in you. Impatience, vanity, greed, boredom, the need to be seen, the inability to sit still, the inability to keep doing the right thing after it stops feeling exciting. Most people do not lose because money is hard. Most people lose because speed is seductive. Speed feels like power. Speed feels like intelligence. Speed feels like progress. But in money, speed without structure is one of the most expensive lies ever sold to ordinary people. It turns judgment into adrenaline, discipline into hesitation, and risk into entertainment. It makes you think you are climbing when you are only accelerating toward a wall. That is the velocity trap. The velocity trap is what happens when you confuse motion with escape. You see somebody get rich in 2 years, 6 months, one trade, one sale, one video, one coin, one lucky break, and your brain stops asking the only question that matters. Not how fast can this move? How much force can it survive? That is the question I would ask before I touched any path to wealth. Not the upside first, not the glamour first, not the probability first. I would ask what part of my character this path will magnify, what part of the environment it depends on. What happens if the timing is wrong, and whether the thing I am building will still exist after the noise is gone, because there are ways to get rich quickly. The world is full of them. A company can go public while you are holding equity. A piece of land can sit quietly until a highway turns it into a fortune. A small business can get systemized and suddenly throw off cash. A niche software tool can be acquired. A sales job can start paying more than medicine. One song can change a decade. One post can open every door in the room. One inheritance can drop capital into your lap. One ticket can hit. One trade can turn a tiny account into the kind of number that makes you forget your last name. Every one of those things is real. What is not real is the fantasy that you can chase all of them with the same identity and survive. That is where ordinary people get destroyed. They do not understand that wealth paths are not just financial paths. They are personality amplifiers. Each one rewards a different nervous system, a different tolerance for uncertainty, a different form of discipline, a different relationship with delayed gratification, a different degree of control over ego. You cannot walk into leverage with the temperament of a gambler and expect to come back wealthy. You cannot inherit money with the instincts of a spender and expect the capital to forgive you. You cannot go viral with no monetization logic and call that strategy. You cannot take equity in a company you do not understand and pretend patience will rescue bad judgment. You cannot step into development, prediction markets, private deals, or high commission sales. If what you really want is emotional comfort, money does not reward your wishes. It rewards your operating system. And most people are running an operating system that was built for social approval, not financial escape. They want salary before ownership, consumption before compounding, recognition before repetition, convenience before control, certainty before upside, and then they wonder why the rich keep pulling away. I will make this even simpler. There are only a few ways people get rich. They either compound over time, they use leverage well, they get equity in something that scales, they own systems instead of labor. They inherit capital and do not destroy it. Or they catch an extreme outcome and manage not to behave like a fool afterward. That is it. The details change, the costumes change. One decade it is land, another decade it is software, another decade it is content. Another decade it is tokens and memes and prediction markets dressed up as intelligence. But under the surface, wealth keeps obeying the same laws, Ownership beats effort, scale beats hours, discipline beats excitement, environment beats intention, and the person who can endure the long, quiet stretch usually beats the person chasing a loud shortcut. That is why the most boring path on the list of fast wealth is often the most rational one. A high-income skill paired with steady investing looks unimpressive because it does not flatter your ego. It does not give you a story you can brag about at dinner. It does not produce a single cinematic moment. It just asks you to become useful, to control your lifestyle, to invest every month, and to let time do the multiplying. An engineer who saves $2,000 a month and invests it consistently does not become a legend on the internet. But over 15 years, the account can swell into something substantial because discipline kept showing up after novelty had died. That path fails not because it is weak. It fails because most people cannot tolerate slow evidence. They need stimulation more than they need freedom. Fay turned 41 file 0 Fay, and that tells you something important. The first enemy in wealth is not lack of opportunity. It is boredom. Boredom is what makes people leave the path that works for the path that sparkles. You see it in careers. Someone joins an early stage company and gets the chance to take equity rather than a larger paycheck. That can become one of the cleanest wealth jumps available if the company is good and the person stays long enough. But most people optimize for current salary because salary feels concrete and ownership feels abstract. They choose the certainty of this month over the asymmetry of the next decade. Then the company exits or goes public, and suddenly two employees who did the same job are living in two different financial universes because one was paid and the other owned. Fay turned 41 file 0 Fay. You see the same principle in small business partnerships. Most people think wealth begins with invention. Often it begins with pattern recognition. A business already works. A tradesman is overwhelmed. An operator needs capital. A founder needs structure. Somebody competent but underbuilt is sitting on a machine that can throw off far more cash if the right partner brings systems, hiring, finance, or negotiation. That is quiet money, not glamorous, not headline money, not something your college roommate can show off with a screenshot, but quiet money is often better because it leaves more of your brain intact. You are not betting on pure novelty. You are improving what already has demand. Fay turned 41 file 0 Fay, the same thing, sits underneath franchises. People mock them because they are not creative. That is exactly why they work. Rich people do not worship originality the way broke people do. Rich people worship repeatability. If the brand works, the traffic is real, the location is right, the unit economics are sound, and management can be installed, then one location becomes two, two becomes seven, and suddenly your fortune did not come from genius. It came from your ability to follow a system more faithfully than people who wanted to express themselves. That bruises the ego of the modern world. But capital does not care. It cares whether the machine produces cash. Fay turned 41 file 0 Fay real estate development is another machine that insults people by how unromantic it really is. Outsiders think it is vision. Often it is patience attached to leverage. You buy where growth is headed, you wait, you improve the legal or physical value of the asset, you raise capital, you borrow against what has been created, and the gains can arrive in large lumps. But this is precisely where the velocity trap becomes dangerous, because slow money that hits all at once can make foolish people think they discovered a universal cheat code. They forget that development punishes thin margins, bad timing, weak financing, and emotional overexpansion. They see the payday. They do not see the years of carrying costs, the zoning risk, the construction risk, the liquidity risk, and the fact that one bad cycle can erase the confidence built by 3 lucky projects. Fay turned 41 file 0 Fay. What I want you to notice is this. Even the fast, legitimate paths usually have a hidden incubation period. Real estate can look sudden when the exit comes, but the setup often takes years. A startup sale can look like a rocket, but before the buyer writes a check, there are years of product market fit, iteration, problem selection, storytelling, and near invisible rejection. A hit song looks like an overnight explosion from the outside, but it may represent 8 or 10 years of unheard work compressed into one cultural spark. Going viral looks instant, but that instant only matters if the person behind it knows how to convert attention into products, relationships, distribution, and owned economics. Fay-Felicite, Fay turn 41 file 0 Fay. That is why I have never been impressed by surface velocity. Surface velocity fools the weak-minded because they stare at the moment of liftoff and ignore the launch pad. The launch pad is the real story. What skills were quietly built? What incentives were aligned? What capital was accumulated? What reputation was earned? What room the person got into? What ownership they held before the spotlight? What tolerance they had for humiliation before the payoff? Without that, you are not studying wealth, you are studying illusion. And illusion is where the most dangerous wealth paths live. Crypto and meme stocks are an example. Yes, people can get rich there. Early positioning in a scarce asset or a mania can create life-changing numbers. Sometimes the teenager with $1,000 really does hold through chaos and comes out with $1 million. But if you misunderstand why, you will poison your future, because the lesson is not that speculation is genius. The lesson is that asymmetry plus timing plus unusual emotional endurance can sometimes produce a crazy outcome. Most people arrive late size too large, confuse luck for skill, and then burn years worshiping a market that was never designed to care about them. The legends are visible, the graveyards are silent. Fay-Felicite, Fay turn 41 file 0 Fay prediction markets do something even more dangerous to the ego. They let people dress gambling in the language of probability. Sometimes the crowd is wrong. Sometimes the narrative is badly priced. Sometimes research really does create an edge. But what happens to an ordinary person after one good outcome is usually predictable. Confidence expands, position sizing deteriorates, restraint gets interpreted as cowardice. Suddenly the person no longer thinks in expected value, they think in destiny, and destiny is one of the fastest ways to hand your capital to somebody more disciplined than you. Fay-Felicite, Fay turn 41 file 0 Fay. Then there is leverage, the most efficient destroyer of self-deception ever invented. Leverage can multiply intelligence. It can also multiply stupidity faster than almost anything on earth. A small move in the right direction can make you rich. A small move in the wrong direction can erase you before lunch. That is why leverage is not just a financial instrument. It is a personality test. If your identity is tied to being right, leverage will eventually humiliate you. If your position sizes are a substitute for self-worth, leverage will eventually bankrupt you. If you crave stimulation, leverage will turn your account into a drug dispenser until the dealer runs out of sympathy. People see the screenshot of someone turning $500 into $80,000 and think the market is offering them escape. What it is usually offering is a mirror, and most people cannot survive what that mirror shows them. Fay-Felicite, Fay turn 41 file 0 Fay. So let me say something that sounds harsh because it is true. Some paths to wealth are not wealth paths for you. They may be real. They may even be legal. They may have made somebody else rich. That does not mean they belong in your hands. A man with extraordinary emotional control, deep market intuition, strict risk management, and the willingness to lose small many times may touch forms of speculation that would destroy almost everyone else. An artist with a decade of invisible labor may eventually produce a hit that becomes an asset. A great salesperson can walk into a commission structure with no money, no degree, and no audience, and build an income that outruns traditional professions because they can move emotion into action and tolerate rejection long after weaker people have fled. But if you borrow the path without becoming the person the path requires, you are not being bold. You are volunteering for punishment. Fay-Felicite, Fay turn 41, file 0 Fay, the source of the velocity trap, is not just greed. It is identity confusion. People keep choosing paths that flatter the fantasy they have about themselves, not the capabilities they actually possess. They think they are founders when they are really operators. They think they are traders when they are really investors. They think they want ownership, but what they actually want is applause. They think they can handle volatility, but they cannot handle 1 month of doubt. They think they want freedom, but they keep choosing status symbols that require servitude to maintain. This is why one sibling can inherit $2 million and be broke in 5 years, while another sibling can turn the same inheritance into $5 million plus and growing. The money did not choose. The character did. Inheritance is not wealth. It is a transfer of responsibility. If you confuse wealth with income, the money will leave. If you feel guilty living differently from the people around you, the money will leave. If you use capital to purchase identity instead of future cash flow, the money will leave. The velocity trap is merciless with unearned money because unearned money gives weak habits a larger weapon. Fay file site Fay turn 41 file 0 Fay the lottery is the purest form of this lesson. Winning does not make you rich, it reveals you. If you were financially disordered before, the number just scales the disorder. If you were private, disciplined, advised, and boring, the number can survive. If you were impulsive, socially porous, and psychologically hungry, the number can disappear beneath cars, houses, relatives, attention, and bad decisions so quickly that the original win starts to look like the first act of a tragedy. Fay file site Fay turn 41 file 0 Fay. Now let me tell you where the smartest people quietly outperform the crowd. They stop asking, what is the fastest way to get rich? And they start asking, what kind of engine am I actually capable of feeding for 10 years? That is a different question. It forces honesty. It forces self-knowledge. It forces you to notice whether your comparative advantage is craft, sales, operating systems, content, taste, capital allocation, deal-making, patience, or proximity, because proximity matters far more than the public likes to admit. Money moves in circles before it moves in headlines. Deals happen in rooms before they happen on platforms. Equity gets offered to trusted insiders before strangers on the internet ever hear about the opportunity. A junior employee who attends the right event, joins the right firm, chooses the right city, helps the right founder, or gets into the right private conversation can compress years of struggle simply by stepping into a live current of opportunity. That is not unfair. That is how reality works. Exposure changes what is visible. Visibility changes what is offered. And what is offered changes the range of outcomes available to you. Fayfulicite Fay turn 41 file 0 Fay poor people are often told to work harder from the exact environment that guarantees their work will remain low. Leverage that as one of the cruelest jokes in modern life. Hard work matters, but where you work, who sees you, what you own, what room you can enter, and what circles trust you matter just as much, sometimes more. You can spend 10 years grinding in a place where the ceiling is welded shut. Or you can spend 3 years in proximity to builders, deal makers, operators, sellers, allocators, and owners, and discover that opportunities are not rare at all. They were just moving in rooms you were never taught to enter. That is why I would tell an ambitious young person to stop fantasizing about speed and start optimizing for transfer. Transfer of skill, transfer of trust, transfer of exposure, transfer of ownership, transfer of reputation, transfer of cash flow from labor into assets. That is real acceleration. Not drama, not screenshots, not bragging rights. Transfer. And if you study every path in your source material closely, that is what sits under the winners. The employee who took equity transferred risk from salary into ownership. The developer transferred patience into leverage. The franchise operator transferred labor into systems. The small business partner transferred capital and judgment into recurring cash flow. The startup founder transferred a niche solution into an acquisition. The salesperson transferred humiliation into income. The flipper transferred taste and speed into margin. The creator transferred attention into distribution and monetization. Even the luck-based winners had to transfer a windfall into preservation or they lost it. Fay filicite, Fay turn 41, file 0, Fay the losers. On the other hand, did the reverse. They transferred future freedom into present excitement. They transferred ownership into salary. They transferred capital into consumption. They transferred luck into ego. They transferred a system into a lifestyle. They transferred a breakthrough into self-destruction. Once you see that the entire game looks different, you stop being hypnotized by the phrase fastest way. Fastest for what? Fastest to a screenshot. Fastest to a temporary spike. Fastest to attention. Fastest to regret, or fastest to durable control over your time. Those are not the same destination. I do not care how quickly you reach a number, if the number owns you the moment you touch it. I do not care how glamorous the path looks, if it requires a nervous system you do not possess. I do not care whether the internet calls it a cheat code if the method turns you into a servant of volatility, vanity, or borrowed status. And you should stop caring too, because the real dividing line between rich and poor is not effort. It is not even intelligence. It is whether you can tell the difference between acceleration and escape velocity. Acceleration feels good. Escape changes the map of your life. Acceleration can happen from one trade, one song, one viral clip, one lucky token, one inheritance check, one prediction market bet, one explosive commission year. Escape usually comes from something less cinematic and more ruthless. Ask a skill that stays valuable, an identity that can withstand boredom, a habit of buying assets instead of applause, a bias toward ownership, the humility to choose systems over self-expression, the patience to let compounding remain invisible long enough to matter, the discipline to survive luck, the courage to move closer to the rooms where capital is already circulating, the intelligence to know which paths can make you rich and which paths would only expose your weaknesses. That is what I would want you to understand if you were sitting across from me asking how to get rich fast. I would tell you that yes, the world sometimes rewards speed, but what it worships, it also uses as bait. The same force that can launch, you can also strip you of judgment. The same asymmetry that can change your life can also seduce you into permanent stupidity. The same shortcut that creates a legend can create 10,000 silent losers. So before you chase the fast path, answer a harder question. What will this path demand from my character before it pays me? If the answer is a temperament you do not have, leave it alone. If the answer is years of invisible repetition and you are unwilling to endure them, leave it alone. If the answer is that you must become calmer, more private, more system-driven, more owner-like, more disciplined, more exposure, seeking, more rational under pressure, then good. At least now you are looking at reality, because the path is never just the path. The path is a machine, and every machine asks for fuel. Some machines ask for patience. Some ask for credibility. Some ask for taste. Some ask for capital. Some ask for nerves of steel. Some ask for 10 years of being ignored. Some ask for the ability to survive sudden abundance. Some ask for social courage. Some ask for restraint, so severe it almost looks boring. The poor keep feeding machines that consume them. The rich keep feeding machines that eventually free them. That is the entire game, and now you are at the real threshold, the one most people avoid because it sounds too personal. You already know enough ways to get rich. You do not need another list. You need a verdict. You need to decide whether you want a fast fantasy or a survivable engine. You need to decide whether you want to impress people with motion or separate from them with ownership. You need to decide whether you will keep offering yourself to the velocity trap every time boredom hits, or whether you will finally build the kind of machine that keeps working after excitement is dead. If you choose the trap, do not complain when it takes your judgment first and your money second. If you choose the engine, do not complain that it feels slow in the beginning. Gravity always feels strongest before escape. But once you break through, the world stops charging you for every breath. That is when wealth begins, not when the number spikes, not when people notice, not when the story sounds exciting, when your machine no longer needs your panic to keep moving, when your assets do more work than your anxiety, when your environment starts sending you opportunities instead of bills, when ownership starts compounding in silence, when you can look at a flashy shortcut and feel nothing. That is the moment I would know you are getting close, because at that point you are no longer chasing speed. You are finally escaping gravity.